First, welcome to our deep dive on automatic visa revalidation, or AVR. In this video, we will explain what AVR is, who can use it, which documents you must carry, and the major pitfalls that can strand travelers outside the United States. We will also cover the critical difference between carrying an original I-797 versus a photocopy, why CBP discretion matters, how dependents fit in, and the notorious Canadian trap. Stay with us as we transition smoothly through each section and end with practical checklists and key takeaways. Next, here is our agenda. We will start with the definition of AVR, then move into eligibility rules, discuss the original versus copy issue, cover family and dependents, and dissect the Canadian trap. Afterward, we will provide a preparation checklist, a quick quiz, do's and don'ts, a few pro tips, and a clear disclaimer. Finally, we will wrap up with key takeaways. Now, let's define AVR. Automatic Visa Revalidation is an administrative exception that permits certain non-immigrants, such as H-1B, O-1 professionals, and F-1 students, to re-enter the United States after a brief trip of 30 days or less to Canada, Mexico, or designated adjacent islands excluding Cuba. Crucially, the traveler's underlying non-immigrant status must remain valid. This validity is demonstrated by a current I-94 record and the appropriate approval notice, such as the I-797 for age classifications. Although the visa stamp in the passport may be expired, the status inside the United States must still be valid on paper. A VR is a narrow exception with strict criteria. Moving on, here are the core AVR rules. First, your trip must be 30 days or less. Second, your travel must be strictly limited to Canada, Mexico, or certain adjacent islands except Cuba. Third, your underlying non-immigrant status must remain valid, shown by a current I-94, and, for categories like H-1B or H-4, a valid I-797 approval notice. Fourth, you must not apply for a new visa stamp while abroad, as doing so will immediately revoke AVR eligibility. Fifth, ensure your passport is valid and bring all supporting documents. For students in F status, carry your properly endorsed I-20 with a recent travel signature. The flowchart visualizes these decision points from eligibility to documentation readiness. However, this is where many travelers take unnecessary risks. While statutes do not always specify that you must present the original I-797, CBP officers have broad discretion at the port of entry. Presenting only a photocopy can raise doubts about your status and provide grounds for extended questioning, delayed processing, or denial. Therefore, the best practice is to carry the original I-797 approval notice, a current I-94 printout, and your valid passport. Depending on your category, you should also carry employer verification or student documentation to quickly establish the validity of your stay. Next, let's contrast the original approval notice with a photocopy. Carrying the original I-797 conveys authenticity and reduces the chance of delays at inspection. It aligns with best practices and minimizes the likelihood of denial. In contrast, presenting only a photocopy often invites additional scrutiny, increases the probability of secondary inspection, and may result in an AVR denial. If denied, you could be forced into consular processing in the country you visited, which is costly and time-consuming. Meanwhile, dependents such as H-4 spouses may also use AVR, provided each dependent independently meets the criteria. Each traveler must have valid status evidence, including a current I-94 and any relevant approvals or school documents. Note that having a U.S. citizen child does not affect AVR eligibility. To stay organized, prepare a separate packet of documents for every traveler in your group. Now, let's examine the Canadian trap. If you attempt to re-enter under AVR and are denied, perhaps because you lacked the original I-797, you will often be required to apply for a visa at a U.S. consulate in the country you visited, such as Canada or Mexico. Additionally, if you apply for a new visa while abroad, AVR eligibility ends immediately. These outcomes can impose significant time and cost burdens, and can disrupt employment or studies. Therefore, plan conservatively and do not attempt AVR unless your documentation is flawless. Additionally, here is a practical checklist. First, print your current I-94 and confirm accuracy. Second, Pack the original I-797 approval notices for all applicable travelers, along with valid passports. Third, F or J students should carry properly endorsed I-20 or DS-2019 forms with recent travel signatures. Fourth, bring employment or enrollment verification such as pay stubs or transcripts. Fifth, carry any prior passport with a visa stamp if applicable, and suitable identification. Sixth, make sure you understand that applying for a new visa abroad cancels AVR. Seventh, verify the entry requirements for Canada or Mexico, including any ETA or visa obligations. Eighth, choose ports of entry known to handle AVR and allocate extra times. Ninth, maintain proof that your trip is 30 days or less. 10th, develop a contingency plan in case you are denied entry, including contacts, funds, and legal support. Next, here is a quick knowledge check. Which scenario best fits AVR eligibility? Option A. A 10-day trip to Canada with an expired visa stamp, but a valid I-94, and the original I-797. Option B. A 20-day trip to Europe with an expired visa stamp and a valid I-94. Option C. A 15-day trip to Mexico after submitting a new visa application there. Option D. A 35-day trip to Canada with a valid I-94. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. Then, the correct answer is Option A. AVR is limited to short trips of 30 days or less to Canada, Mexico, or qualifying adjacent islands, requires that underlying status remains valid as evidenced by the I-94 and, if applicable, the I-797, and prohibits applying for a new visa while abroad. Options B, C, and D each violate one or more of these rules. Afterward, here is a concise table of do's and don'ts. Do carry the original approval notice and a current I-94. Do limit your trip to 30 days or less. Do restrict travel to Canada, Mexico, or eligible adjacent islands and avoid Cuba. Do not apply for a new visa while abroad. Do prepare full supporting documents, and do plan a backup in case of denial. Conversely, do not rely on a photocopy. Overstay the 30 days. Visit ineligible countries. Assume you will not be questioned, or travel without a contingency plan. Moreover, consider these practical tips. First, land border crossings may avoid airline boarding issues when airline personnel do not understand AVR. Second, present a neatly organized document folder to minimize delays. Third, respond to questions calmly and concisely, focusing on documentation. Fourth, if denied, contact your employer or school and legal counsel immediately. Finally, avoid repeated reliance on AVR and schedule a proper visa renewal when feasible. Furthermore, this mind map organizes AVR into 5 clusters: eligibility, documents, risks, dependents, and outcomes. Eligibility highlights the 30-day limit, the restricted destinations of Canada, Mexico, and qualifying adjacent islands excluding Cuba, continued valid status evidenced by I-94 and I-797, and the requirement not to apply for a new visa while abroad. Documents include the passport, original I-797, and I-94 printout, student forms where applicable, and verification letters. Risks emphasize CBP discretion, the possibility of denial leading to consular processing, and airline misunderstandings. Dependents are addressed by ensuring each person independently qualifies and carries their own packet. Outcomes range from smooth admission to secondary inspection or denial, and the Canadian trap. However, an essential disclaimer is necessary. This video provides general information and education only and does not constitute legal advice. Immigration policies, procedures, and interpretations can change without notice. Your specific facts matter, and you should consult a qualified immigration attorney for personalized guidance. When in doubt, avoid traveling under AVR unless your documentation is complete and accurate. Next, here are the key takeaways. AVR applies only to short trips to Canada, Mexico, or certain adjacent islands excluding Cuba. Your status must remain valid, supported by a current I-94 and the original I-797. Do not apply for a new visa while abroad if you intend to rely on AVR. If you are denied, you should anticipate consular processing in the country you visited. Ultimately, thorough preparation and flawless documentation are essential. Finally, to wrap up, AVR is a powerful exception when used correctly. Because CBP officers have broad discretion, originals and well-organized documentation are indispensable. Plan conservatively to avoid the Canadian trap, and use the preparation checklist to travel confidently and within the law. As we conclude, consider your personal facts and seek legal advice when necessary. As a closing note, thank you for watching. If this video helped you, please like, share, and subscribe for more practical immigration insights. Share your experiences and questions about AVR in the comments so we can learn together.